Welcome to Seeing the Unseen, the podcast about those microscopic creatures, bacteria, viruses, and parasites that we share our lives with. This is Dr. Carrie Murad from the Biology Department at the College of St. Rose. Today, members of the Spring 2011 Pathogenic Microbiology class are bringing to you another exciting installment of our 6-part series on disease-causing microorganisms. Our fourth podcast in the series, Seeing the Unseen, just in time for baseball season, is entitled Sports-Associated Infections. From athlete's foot to impetigo, our conversation revolves all around sports and what infections to watch out for when participating in different types of sports. So get your peanuts and Cracker Jacks and sit back and enjoy this lively discussion from Mike Allen, John Scally, Brian Shaver, and John Kelly.
Good afternoon and welcome back to the College of St. Rose Seeing the Unseen podcast series. I'm Mike Allen with my co-host John Scally. How are you today, John?
Hey, Mike. I'm doing fine, just thank you. We have an excellent discussion lined up for us today. As all the listeners know, we are a huge sports fans, and today we're going to be talking about the common infections of sports. This has been a topic and has made headlines in the recent past. Some colleges and professional level sports have teams that have been affected by bacterial infections.
We have a couple of different guests lined up today. First, we'll have Dr. Brian Shaver, who's been in the field doing some very interesting research on the topic. Dr. Shaver is renowned for his research in the field of microbiology and currently sits as the chair of the Department of Microbiology at the University of Massachusetts. So we hope to have a good conversation with him. Also on today, we'll have John Kelly, starting linebacker for the Cleveland Browns. John was forced to sit out a game last season after developing a mild MRSA infection that he feels has altered his career path, so we're happy to have him on today as well.
Well, it sounds like we have a great show. Let's jump right in. You may not think of skin infections as a potential health problem for athletes, but taking part in sports can expose you to anything from athlete's foot to serious skin infections that could lead to serious health problems. The reason that sports are the potential risk are pretty simple. Often sports lead to skin-to-skin contact between athletes and contact with previously used equipment. Athletes are also high risk because they often produce more sweat, which can impair the skin and may be prone to more scratches and scrapes when infections can enter. Now, you don't have to be on a professional sports team to be exposed to these infections. Nationally, they have been on the rise at all levels of athletics, from Little League to Major League.
And that's a very important point to talk about, John. People need to be aware if they are active in athletics that serious infection can occur if the proper steps aren't taken to protect yourself. Once one player on a team becomes infected, everyone else is at a greater risk, and some organisms can live on inanimate objects for hours. With that background, I want to get into some specific infections that are commonly seen in athletics. We'll start today with athlete's foot. This is an extremely common fungal infection caused by the fungi of the Trichophyton genus. It is an infection that is most commonly spread in areas where people walk barefoot, such as locker rooms and swimming pools. The fungi enjoy warm, moist environments and can grow in showers when they are not cleaned properly. Once the growth begins, if a person steps on the microscopic parasite, it will adhere to the skin and begin to multiply. The person will eventually develop flaky, itchy skin in the infected area. In severe cases of athlete's foot, the skin will crack and blister, which can lead to secondary bacterial infection, which will require antibiotic treatment. Generally, however, athlete's foot is not particularly serious. Good hygiene has been proven to eliminate infection in 30 to 40% of cases, and over-the-counter medications are used to clear the majority of infections. So athlete's foot isn't a particularly harmful communicable disease, but still most teams out there would prefer to keep their feet clear of infection, I am sure.
I'm sure you're absolutely right. I personally dealt with athlete's foot on a number of occasions, and it's not a pleasant infection. It is certainly preventable, and good general hygiene can help prevent the disease. Also, since the fungi prefer warm, moist environments, keeping footwear clean and dry will help reduce the possibility of infection. The problem with athlete's foot on sports team is that once a person develops it, they can spread it in the team locker rooms. This is a common theme among sports-related infections.
Well, it sounds to me, John, like you need to improve your foot hygiene. Is that right?
Well, Mike, I think we both know that microorganisms are capable of living in many diverse environments. So even with excellent hygiene, infections can develop. But let's go off the subject of athlete's foot and move on to more serious infections.
Good idea. Anything to get the questions directed away from you. But for real, there are two related infections that we want to talk about today. The first being impetigo. Impetigo is an extremely common, contagious skin infection that can produce sores and blisters on the face, neck, and hands. The infection is caused by one of two species of the Staphylococcus genus. Staph aureus is the most common cause of infection, but Staph pyogenes can also cause impetigo. Just for some background, Staph aureus are single-celled organisms that can replicate quickly in the human body and spread quickly, sometimes causing the disease impetigo.
Now, before you start swearing out bacteria, it is important to note that Staph aureus maintains a natural human reservoir. All of us in the human population carry strains of Staph aureus that are non-pathogenic as part of the normal flora, but it is the potentially harmful strains that we'll be discussing this afternoon. Any sport that requires close contact, like rugby, football, hockey, or wrestling, can lead to an impetigo infection. Also, similar to athlete's foot, the bacteria are extremely contagious, and they can live in inanimate objects such as towels. So sharing items such as towels or razors could lead to infection. Now, if you would, Mike, please tell our listeners how the infection could appear on the skin.
Well, the skin forms lesions appearing as honey-colored scabs that can be found on the arms, legs, and face. It's important to know that there is more than one form of impetigo. There's the bullous form, which is usually fluid-filled blisters, and ischemia impetigo, which is the more serious form that generally penetrates the dermal layer of the skin.
Sounds like to me that ecthymia form is more painful.
That's right, painful pus-filled sores that may lead to ulcers on the skin, and there may be scars left after the ulcers heal.
Wow, that's something you may want to have taken care of.
Yeah, well, that's because without treatment, the staph can spread, and I don't just mean to other people, it can spread within an individual's body as well.
Well, you seem pretty knowledgeable on the subject. Mike, so why don't you tell us how impetigo is treated?
Well, before antibiotics, people use antiseptic genuine violet, the same dye that microbiologists use for staining bacteria. Luckily, that is no longer used, and topical or oral antibiotics are usually capable of clearing infection. Ointments such as fusidic acid, miprocin, or neosporin are often used, and amoxicillin is used in serious cases of infection.
Well, that's some great info. Hopefully the listeners take notice about athlete's foot and impetigo and practice good hygiene, especially before, during, and after athletic competition. So now we're going to transition from impetigo, which remember is caused by certain strains of bacterium Staphylococcus aureus, to MRSA or methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. This is an extremely serious infection, and as its name suggests, it is resistant to methicillin and other common antibiotics that are typically used to treat Staph aureus. MRSA infections have been on the rise in locker rooms and hospitals in over the past 10 years. And although healthcare associates MRSA infections as extremely important, we're going to focus primarily on MRSA affected on athletes. When MRSA is seen on otherwise healthy individuals who have not recently visited the hospital, the case is referred to as community-associated MRSA. In particular, today we're going to be talking about the history of MRSA infections in Cleveland Browns organization. For those out there who are not particularly interested in professional sports, the Browns are a member of the National Football League and the highest professional league in American football.
But before we get to the specific case of the Browns, we're going to talk about the pathology of MRSA. As stated earlier in the show, Staph aureus is a gram-positive non-motile coccus. The bacteria is a facultative anaerobe, meaning they can grow in environments with oxygen but prefers to live without oxygen present. Just like athlete's foot and impetigo, the infection spreads through skin-to-skin contact. Once an infection gets inside of a human host, it adheres to the extracellular matrix of human cells. The cell wall of the bacteria is sometimes broken down by enzymes within human cells. The degradation of the cell wall induces an immune response that leads to a fever.
But the bacterial infection can lead to much more serious complications than routine fever. Staph aureus has a unique ability to evade the immune system that can lead to serious problems in infected patients. Staph aureus bacteria have protein A, which can be found in the cell wall. The protein binds to antibodies produced by the human immune system and changes the way the antibodies bind to the bacteria. This renders the antibodies useless against bacterial infection. The ability to do this is unique to Staph aureus.
The bacteria that cause MRSA infection also contain 4 different toxins that have various roles in disease. The names of the toxins are alpha, beta, delta, and gamma toxin, respectively. Alpha toxin triggers the production of an inflammatory mediators. This causes the events of septic shock, which is a full-body shock due to bacterial infection. This toxin basically overstimulates the immune system, and this leads to damage of vital organs and a lack of blood flow. Septic shock is extremely serious and can be fatal.
This is clearly a very serious condition and occurs only in a small number of cases. Gamma toxin is the other highly dangerous chemical produced by Staph aureus and is the most common case of severe skin-eating infections. The toxin damages cell membranes of the host cells. This can lead to a lot of cell death in skin, which is referred to as necrotizing or cell-killing skin infections.
So that's a couple of ways in which this contagious skin infection can present large problems in individuals. The most common and apparent symptoms of MRSA infection are inflammation of the skin, such as boils, abscesses, rashes, and carbuncles. More severe symptoms of MRSA occur when the infection has spread and can include fever, chills, low blood pressure, joint pain, severe headaches, and shortness of breath. As stated earlier, if the infection goes untreated, it can lead to septic shock and even death. So these infections are nothing to mess around with. Community-associated MRSA infections are common in locker rooms for the same reasons as other sports-related infections we discussed earlier. Athletes often produce a lot of sweat, which can impair the ability of the skin to fight infections, and they are also prone to skin lesions that can allow Staph aureus to get inside of the body and wreak havoc.
Now, the specific problem of methicillin-resistant Staph aureus is right in the name. A particular strain of the bacteria is resistant to methicillin and other common antibiotics that are used to treat the disease. This causes problems with treating the infection, and the longer the infection exists in the body, the more harmful it becomes. So what doctors can and healthcare providers do to stop the infection of the body, and what can they do to keep it from spreading to the team locker rooms? To talk about this, we have invited Dr. Brian Schaefer, a researcher who has been involved with ongoing MRSA infection problems seen in a Cleveland Browns training facility. Thank you very much for being part of us today, Dr. Schaefer.
Very glad to be here, guys. Thanks for having me on.
So before we get into your current work, please tell us what doctors do when they discover a case of methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus.
Well, first thing they do is run and hide. No, but really, the treatment for MRSA can be very complex. We start by taking a culture from the patient and send it to the lab. There in the lab, they perform a test referred to as the Kirby-Bauer assay. We take a sample of bacteria and spread it on a plate rich in nutrients so it can grow. Then to this plate, we add discs that contain various antibiotics, some that are effective and some that are not. We wait a day or two to see if this bacteria will grow and look at the plate. If the specific bacteria is resistant to the antibiotics on the plate, it will grow normally. On the other hand, if one of the antibiotics is effective, there will be a ring around the disc where there was no bacterial growth. This shows that the particular antibiotic is effective against a specific strain of bacteria that the patient has. We study a variety of different antibiotics until multiple effective antibiotics are found. We then enter the patient into antibiotic treatment. If the infection is minor, the antibiotics can be taken orally and in an outpatient setting. On the other hand, if the infection has spread to different parts of the body, then the antibiotic will have to be administered intravenously.
And how effective is this treatment against MRSA?
Well, that really depends. It first depends on the specific strain of the infection that the patient is diagnosed with. Second, on the severity of the symptoms. Thirdly, on how well the patient adheres to the antibiotic schedule set forth by their healthcare provider. All too often, patients stop taking their antibiotics when they start to feel better, but before the infection is entirely eliminated. Then when the antibiotic treatment stops, the bacteria are able to grow again and cause even more problems for the patient.
Very interesting stuff there, Dr. Schaefer. Now, we said we've been talking about these infections as if they were related to sports, and you seem to be the perfect guest to talk about the specific subject. So please give us a background on the problem at the Cleveland Browns training facility.
I've been working on this specific case in 2005, but it dates back to 2003. That year, a young tight end on the team by the name of Ben Taylor got scratched on his leg during a summer practice. The scratch was maybe only an inch long, and Taylor didn't give it a second thought at the time. But within 24 hours, his joints ached and he had developed a severe headache and nausea. He spent 5 days in the hospital and had 2 surgeries, losing a total of 12 pounds. He was the first Cleveland Brown player to be diagnosed with MRSA, and over the past 8 years, MRSA infections have been popping up in players, leading to hospitalization and loss of playing time.
Is there any idea where the original infection came from, Dr. Schaefer?
We believe that the bacteria may have been present in the hot tub the players were using after practice. It is an environment that is suitable for bacterial growth, and Taylor's infection-opened wound was exposed to the warm waters of the hot tub.
So that infection occurred in 2003, and we're lucky enough to have Ben Taylor as a guest on the show a little later on. But what's been happening since then? What does your current research involve?
Well, since that incident, the Browns have had a series of staph cases in recent years. One particular case in 2006 was life-threatening, and the player nearly had to have his leg amputated in order to stop the spread of infection. I've been hired by the Cleveland Browns to research and find any possible ways that they can reduce the risk of MRSA to their players. This organization invests a lot of time and money in these young men, and they take their health very seriously. So I've been hired to investigate the ways the bacteria spread and prevent any future problems.
And what sorts of things have you implemented to the Cleveland Browns that help stop the MRSA spread? I see here that there hasn't been a reported case of staph since the infection of 2008.
Well, first and foremost is education. The players know me and I know them. I talk to them at the beginning of the year on how serious staph infections are and how important personal hygiene is to stopping their spread. I also make sure everyone reports open wounds such as cuts and scratches to me. I make sure they're covered with clean, dry bandages. Then, from a more preventative standpoint, I look for staph everywhere in the training facility. I test the hot tub weekly as well as the weightlifting and team showers. All of these things seem to have been successful so far because we haven't had a problem in a few years.
Dr. Schaefer, I'm interested when you tell me that you test for staph. We've told listeners already that Staph aureus is a common bacteria found as part of the human flora. So how can you tell the difference between harmless Staph aureus and harmful Staph aureus?
Well, I'm really concerned with finding antibiotic-resistant forms of staph. I use the same Kirby-Bauer assay that I described earlier to see if staph species I'm finding are resistant to antibiotics. Certainly I find Staph aureus on a common basis, but as of yet, no antibiotic-resistant forms.
That's excellent news, Dr. Schaefer. Thank you very much for stopping in and sharing with us. It's certainly very informative.
Thanks for having me, guys. Take care.
So we've gotten a lot of great information about the development of MRSA, how it spreads, and how it can be treated. But now we switch gears to talk about the effect that a serious MRSA infection can have on a professional athlete's career. With us now, we have Ben Taylor, former linebacker from the Cleveland Browns, to talk with us about MRSA, his bout with it. Good afternoon, Ben.
What's up, fellas?
Not much, Ben. We have a lot of listeners out there who probably don't know your specific story. So if you would, please share with us.
Oh, absolutely, guys. Well, I was an up-and-coming NFL player. Browns drafted me in 2001. I just sat the sidelines for the first couple of years, just paying my dues. In 2003, I was expected to have a big year, get some playing time, really establish myself as a serious player in the league. One day in practice, we're doing some tackling drills, and I get a little cut on my leg. No blood or anything, just a little scratch. You guys got to realize, you've been playing your football your whole life. A little scratch doesn't mean anything to you. So I went back, got changed. After practice, jumped in the hot tub because I was sore, headed home. Didn't think anything about the scratch. Next day, I woke up with a fever, some body aches. Still wasn't thinking much about it. Until I got to practice, I was in so much pain, they had to call an ambulance to take me to the hospital. 2 days later, I was diagnosed with methicillin-resistant Staph aureus.
And what happened after that? How did you recover?
Well, I was placed on a couple antibiotics, a combination of amoxicillin and vancomycin. Stayed in the hospital for 3 nights. I eventually recovered due to excellent treatment by my doctors, but never stepped on the field that year.
And how long did it take you to reach a full recovery?
Around 2 weeks. I was real far behind. I couldn't get back on the field. I wasn't in the kind of shape I was in, before this all happened. I feel that's why I never performed up to my expected level for the rest of the season.
Now, do you feel that this MRSA infection had a long-term impact on your career?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Browns didn't sign me after 03-04. I was forced to accept a short-term contract with Green Bay after that. They considered me more of a practice player so I never got the chance I deserved in the NFL. I left the league in 07 and have taken up coaching at the collegiate level. MRSA has had a huge impact on my life and my entire family. And since the outbreak, I have advocated for staph infection education in athletic departments at high schools, college, and professional levels.
Tell us a little about the Staphylococcus education.
I don't have a particular foundation or anything like that, but I discuss my stories with people that are willing to listen. I believe that through my work, the NFL has increased its level of monitoring for staph, as well as some high schools and college teams as well. Locker rooms and training facilities are breeding grounds for MRSA, and the last thing I want to see is someone else have the same infection as serious as mine. I know that in some ways I was lucky because my infection was localized. I didn't have to experience some of the side effects like septic shock or amputation as some others had to, but still, what I went through was life-changing, and here I'm just trying to get the word out. I want people to be knowledgeable about the disease and, do what they have in their power to keep themselves safe.
Well, that's certainly an excellent message, and we're glad that you could help get out to a wider audience. Thank you, Ben, very much for your time.
Again, that was Ben Taylor, former Cleveland Browns linebacker, who was diagnosed with methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, or MRSA, an antibiotic-resistant strain of a disease-causing bacteria. Effects of the bacterial infection can be very serious and are seen more and more commonly in sports locker rooms. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'd like to thank our guests, Ben Taylor and Dr. Brian Shaver, as well as my co-host, John Scally. Remember to listen in to all the other excellent information that can be heard in the Seeing the Unseen podcast series.